I will give you a quick idea about this. When we say now research, we've done some research. The green paper you have has just random comments on it, which at some point you may want to take a look at it. The other packet that you have, if you've already gone inside, I'm not worried about it, but I would appreciate if you would follow us page by page by page as we go through it, and I'll tell you where you are when we're going through it. Here's what we now know and why we've done this. Mary Ann, first of all, asked me to come into her school, the tech school here, CPI. This was about 3 years ago. She asked me to come in. She said they had reached a point where they felt somewhat like, nah, we're doing well, but we're not excited, we're not doing things. And so I did a full morning of a workshop with this concept that I deal with. But where Mary Ann and I have gone with it is related to the teacher shortage in the United States. And we have done this on a national level 3 times. And we're very happy with the responses we've gotten on the national level. But I will tell you that we have one gentleman in here who I did interview for this, but now that any of you are here, we would not use you in the interviews that we do with people. When we interview people, we want them cold, we want them to have no idea what we're going to ask them, and what we look for are gut reactions. And I'll explain later who it is. But we're relating it to this teacher shortage. It's real. I talked with Michael yesterday from Berks County, right? Okay? And Michael shared with us how they've had programs that they've had difficulty filling places with teachers, and that it's an ongoing thing. Many schools are facing it, but across the country, we in Pennsylvania, I should put it this way, we in Pennsylvania have no clue what it's like across the country. I do work in Detroit, and some of you might say, well, I can understand it for Detroit, but even the suburban areas, which are excellent schools and good places, they can't fill their classrooms with teachers. They cannot find them. I don't know how many of you saw it last week. CBS News and their evening news did a thing on the fact that right now in Tucson, Arizona, they are hiring Filipino people to come there to teach because they cannot find American teachers. They can't find them, and they work out a system with them to bring them in to teach in their school district. And as it was pointed out, the whole state of Arizona is doing it. We have a teacher shortage right now. And we relate this to some of this. Here's what we know about teachers. Actually, on a national level, 1/3 of them are leaving the field within the first 5 years that they teach. They're gone. They don't stay. By the way, what makes us somewhat unique in Pennsylvania, and other than the urban areas, but even the urban areas, this is somewhat true. What makes us unique, we are a very, very colonized state. Many people want to go back home to teach. They want to go back home to teach. The other thing that separates us out is we have more teacher certification institutes than any other state in the United States. We certify more people to teach. But if you followed wherever you have lived or wherever you went to school, that is diminishing. The number of people now going into education is diminishing rapidly. We know that, and here's something you need to be aware of. Right now, across the United States, 2/3 of states are currently reporting a shortage of CTE teachers in at least one program area. They aren't there. I know currently that locally here, CPI has a position open they cannot fill. And Michael, am I correct? You told me that you have one that you're having difficulty.
We were posting for a drafting instructor for about 6 months.
Okay, they can't fill it. It is happening. Now, I also put 2 and 2 together. In the career and technical world, if you're a welder, you're making so much money out there right now, why would you go into teaching? But our contention is, and this is where we're going to go with this, our contention is there are people who would be wonderful teachers, but one of the things we have to do is unlock who they really are. We have to get them thinking about it, and we're going to make this interactive with you. You're going to be thinking about that today. And you're going to be thinking about what's my real purpose as an educator? What am I truly doing? What we have learned and what we're giving you is information from 31 teachers that we have interviewed. Here was what we asked. We went to the principal and we said, we want a teacher who you know is not going to leave. You know that person, barring health issues, barring some family issue that they can't avoid, you have this sense, this teacher is locked into this, they are not going to leave what they do. So we worked with 31 teachers in 10 different states. The states where we worked were right there. And people we talked to, Arkansas, Indiana, you can read the list. U.S. Virgin Islands even, where I have the good fortune to get to work occasionally with their schools down there. So if anybody wants to go along, you need a passport, and their bureaucracy for licenses is unreal. But anyway, we get to work, so we had a chance to interview a couple of people from there as well. These were subjects, and I have to tell you, there's one subject on there that we did not hit in these first 31 that we talked with. We don't have anybody from the arts, which I believe is critical, and my son pointed that out to me because he's a professor of opera in Mississippi, and so he thinks it's important we get somebody with an arts background, which this is ongoing with us. But we're going to show you what we learned with these people as we work with them. Our concept is this. As you go through this, we're going to be asking you to be thinking the whole way through, what is your purpose as an educator? What's your purpose as an educator? Not what do you teach, not how do I get ready for NOCTI, not how do I do this, whatever it might be, how do I manage my classes, not that. What's my purpose in the profession of teaching is what we want you to think about throughout. I love the statement by Bennett, if you have a strong purpose in life, you don't have to be pushed. Your passion will drive you there. You will go there. And so we would ask that you think about this. Now I want you to open those booklets if you haven't done so. And right there, in the first page, you have a cloud, if I remember correctly. And the cloud asks you a question. And the question is, write a thought. It says in there a word. You can put down a thought, however you want to do this, a thought as to why you became an educator. Why did you become an educator? What stuck with you? So put that down in the cloud. I'm not going to look at these, by the way, so you put it down so you understand it. Why did you become an educator? Do you have one, Marcia?
I did.
Okay, now what I want you to do, you've gotten something down there. Pick a person next to you, behind you, wherever it is, and talk with each other. I'm going to give you like a minute to share with each other. Why did you become an educator? Okay, would you please reconvene with me? I wish this was set up that I could walk through those rows. I feel more comfortable getting close to you, but they've got me blocked. All right, you made a comment. Here are two comments, or a couple of comments that we learned from people that we interviewed. This one is interesting to us because it's I would say, one we think about. This lady said, I came from a very poor background. She's from Arkansas, and she said, I just wanted to help kids to see that they could go as far as I could go. Another lady said this. By the way, I've got to admit, I'm standing here the same way. This was a lady from Oklahoma. Basketball has been a major part of my life. I followed my love of basketball into teaching and coaching. And she told us how her dad had been a basketball coach, and that's what she did. That's how she ended up doing it. Now I'd like you to do this. In that sheet, I'd like you to put down the word that you think best describes that. An educator is. What would you say that word is? Write it down in that book. Again, this is for you. We're not going to take a look at this. You put it down. An educator is. Okay, again, share it with the person that you talk to or somebody else if you want, but share it with somebody. An educator is. Please come back with me. And now, this is what I'm going to ask. I would like someone to share with the whole group what you heard from the person that you talked to and you thought, ooh, that's a unique way to state this. An educator is. Would someone do that? Yes?
Motivator.
A motivator. Someone else. You heard somebody. Marcia.
Passionate. Passionate.
Is passionate. Okay? Can we have another one? Go ahead.
Essential.
Essential.
I don't mean a teacher, I mean an educator.
An educator. Okay. All right. Were you going to put your hand up?
No, but I can share mine. I said inspiring.
Okay. An educator is inspiring. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment and react. I'd like somebody to react. Why do we use the term educator, not teacher? Why do we use the word educator and not the word teacher when we pose this? I see some of you smiling. You might have thought about it. I think you had the idea, but go ahead.
It could be a counselor. A counselor.
It could be a counselor. All right? Someone else.
It's also be a paraprofessional.
It could be a paraprofessional.
To me, it's the difference between someone who's filling a role and someone who has a desire to impact them positively.
Okay? Okay. Our mentality in this is very simply this. The world of education is filled with sociological stratification. You heard the lady who gave the presentation yesterday refer to this point. Sociological stratification. Go to a party, what do? I teach AP English at State College High School. Oh, I'm only a kindergarten teacher. Or, for some of you, and I'm not going to ask you purposefully today, some of you might, I teach tech school. That is a problem that we have in our culture of our own professional culture. I told Jody this earlier. When I was a central administrator and having a terrible day, I'd go watch a kindergarten class and realize I didn't have any problems at all. I had no problems. Stepfather that can handle 19 of those little children at that age. I mean, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter next door. It's actually a step-granddaughter, but she calls me Grandpa. Anyway, she comes over. I get tired just watching her. I don't even have to move. Okay? So we want you to think in terms of educator. It's a word, but I'm an old English teacher, English major. There's a significant difference between an educator and a teacher in the way people think about the term. Now, here's some things we learned from the people we talked with. This was a unique one from a gentleman in Texas. My purpose in life is to be a guardian. I believe an educator is a guardian. Here's one. An educator is a difference maker. My purpose is to make a difference in students. And this one, which I thought was very interesting. An educator is a communicator. If you think about it for a moment, think of all the ways you need to communicate, not just with kids. You need to communicate with parents. You need to communicate with your neighboring teacher. You need to be able to communicate with the boss. You also need to be able to communicate with your significant other when you go home about, oh my goodness, I'm beat to death over working with those kids, and they can't believe it. You know, how can that possibly be? How can you be tired working with a group of kids, playing with them all day? Okay? Now, we found that teachers interviewed displayed the desire to lead students. That was one of their major motivations. They actually saw themselves as a leader. And when we poll a whole group, did anybody list that, by the way? An educator is a leader? I would want you to think, okay, Steve's got it. All right, he's a new teacher, by the way. Okay? But the idea is, if you're a teacher, or if you are an educator, you're leading a group of people. You have a group of people that you lead. Now think about this. How many leadership courses were you ever offered in the process of becoming the professional that you are? How much time was spent on what leaders do? Because I don't care if they're kindergarten kids or seniors or college students, which I've taught, I did teach several years for Wilkes University, graduate level students, you're working with a group of people, regardless how old they are. And many of the leadership techniques have to work with that group of people. Well, we heard this from many of those that we interviewed. Here's what I love, this statement. Leadership is a process of social influence. which maximizes the efforts of others. What do you do as an educator? Is your purpose along those lines that you want to maximize those people that you teach, you want to maximize what they're capable of doing or can do? Have you ever I'm not going to judge anything, have you really ever considered that? Here's what we would like you to do right now. On your paper, in that book, you are asked 3 questions. By the way, you have to be able to do a little math here. First thing we're asking you is this: how many students do you currently have? Or this year, how many will you have? And then, what we're going to ask you to do is multiply it by 20. That number comes up from this fact. Some of you already have 20 years of experience. Some of you quite possibly will have 20 years of experience. So we want you to put down the number of students that you actually directly impact right now and multiply it by 20. And then you have a product down there that we want you to fill in. And we want you to take a really good, close look at this. Have you ever imagined, have you ever stopped to think that you directly impacted that many people in your life, or you will impact in your life? We did this workshop at high schools at work at the SREB conference a couple years ago, and the guy from South Carolina came up to me afterward, and he says, I got to tell you something. He said, I liked your presentation, don't misunderstand me. But he said, I could not get away from that question you asked us about the number of students and people I impacted in my life. He said, I looked at that and thought, I can't believe this. I have a direct impact on that many people. Now, put his thought together with your thought of the number you impact and ask yourself the question, how many of those kids' parents spend as much time with them as you do? Directly with them. Directly in contact with them the way you do. Those of you that teach in a tech school haven't for quite a while. Those of you that teach in a traditional high school or middle school, you haven't for a period a day, every day. But that's a lot of time that you have a direct impact on those kids. So we're going to come back to the idea you're an educator, not a teacher. You have a direct influence and you lead those kids. You will make an impact on them to make a social influence in life. Okay, so we asked that question. Now we're going to take a look at the 8 questions that we talk about, and that we have the people who we went through answer these questions. And Jody, now you can pass those papers out. We break some responses out for you, but we're going to explain to you where they came. We're going to ask you to follow along in the book, and we're going to ask you to do what we ask you to do. You'd now be on this page that has 3 questions, and then over to the right of it, it will have 3 boxes. So here's where we're going to go. First of all, you've got to answer this for yourself. What is your passion? Now, we've said to every teacher that we have interviewed, we don't care whether this is about education or not. We want to know what your passion is. So we would ask you to do this, and we give you some thoughts that go with it. During your morning routine, what do you think about? In the midst of discussions, meetings, or driving, you think about it. I'm going to pick on a colleague and a very good friend of mine, Todd Luke. Those of you who know him. You can't talk to Todd that he doesn't come back to some max teaching strategy. You can't talk to him until he's back to it. Or some data. It could be data. He's right back there. You know without any question, that is Todd's passion. Okay, don't you feel sorry for his wife? No. Anyway, okay. The other thing, when I get a random cue about it, I begin to talk about it. I feel excitement anytime this thing comes in any situation. You can see the questions. We'd like you to fill in the box. What is your passion? Just write that down, whatever it is. It does not have to be from education. It can be from anything. And you will note in a minute, we have many different kinds of responses. Put that in the box. This is for you. And I'm not going to ask you right now to share that with anybody. You may if you want to, but I'm not going to ask you to do that right now. what we learned from the people who we spoke with, 31 teachers that we talked with. We found 25% of them had a focus in their statement on students. By the way, we're not judging these. There is no judgment whatsoever. We found 21.9% family was their passion. We found 18.8% helping people, and you see the rest. Notice the one, the fourth one, my subject, and the fifth one, teaching. I think maybe you all know this, but I'm going to say it. Our research on secondary teachers and elementary teachers. Elementary teachers love children. They make no bones about it. That's what kind of drew them into it. Secondary teachers, I love math. I love English. We have one that says, I love history. Okay? So, you see here are some ideas of what they did. I like that one, preparing students for adulthood. A couple of them said that was their passion. Let's move on to the next one. What do you really love to do? By the way, your passion and what you really love to do can be a little bit different. I used to tell this, I don't so much anymore because I don't play that much anymore, but my passion used to be golf. I was passionate about getting on a golf course as often as I possibly could. But what I really love to do is this kind of thing. I don't deny that, okay? So I want you to think about it. What do I really love to do? Bill Gates made it very clear. We never thought that we would make much money of the thing. We just loved writing software. When he was a kid, that was his thing. He just loved doing that. So he continued to do it. Here are your trigger thoughts that go with it. What did I enjoy doing more than anything when I was 8 years old? By the way, that can carry over into adult life. Too many of us, at the age of 8, love doing something and force ourselves to do something else at the age of 28. We force ourselves to do something else. Okay? When doing this, I can easily skip a meal. You can read them. Please write in the box, what do you love to do? You absolutely love to do it. Our reactions from teachers who we interviewed. The majority, I shouldn't say, I guess a plurality of them, had a teacher action comment. Now I'm going to share this with you. Many of these people told us up front, I cannot separate myself from being a teacher. I cannot separate it. I can't separate that light from who I am. That's who I am. So their statement reflected it. Some of them had personally centered comments. Some interpersonal relationships. And there were a couple subject-centered comments. Both of them secondary teachers, by the way, that I remember specifically. Now what I'd like you to do, you have that filled in, and let's start to do this. Jody passed a sheet of white paper across, and it gives you some reactions from each question that we have divided by question. And I'd like you to take a look at the first two. What is my passion and what do I love to do? And you'll begin to see how we began to break these out. We're not even close to being finished with this research, but we began to break them out in this way. And you'll begin to see that as you read some of those reactions. Now I'm going to move on. Third question, and we use Oprah as part of this. I don't know how many of you know the background on Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey, at age 3, was doing recitations and singing songs in her church. She was up front. She will tell you, when you hear her interviewed and she shares her information, how that's who she was. That's who she was. She took center stage. She was in that place, not from an ego trip. It's who I am. It's what I do. It's what I love. So she makes the comment, follow your instincts. This is where true wisdom manifests itself. Your instincts. Here are the trigger thoughts that we give you to think about what do you do very well. And we'd like you to write that in the box. What do you do? And you know you do it very well. I've worked with some teachers who will say to me, I don't want to put that, that's an ego trip if I put something down. No, this is for you to look at yourself. What do you know? You do it very well. Put that in that box. What we found from the teachers who we interviewed, the 31, these were things that showed up immediately in their responses. By the way we interviewed them was orally. They had no idea what the questions would be. We did it orally, and we told them, I want your immediate gut reaction. If somebody thought too long, we didn't use them. We were polite, we took their information, but we didn't use them. We wanted gut immediate reactions to these questions. So, this is what we saw from them. Notice how many of those things relate to being an educator or relate to working with students or people. This one is interesting to me. Mary Ann always jumps on that one right away because she said, we've got to keep that on the list. Data analysis, because the lady kind of phrased it a little differently. She was a high school teacher in Maryland, but the point was she's always focusing on data, always focusing on where do the kids fit, where are they in the group, what goes on with the group of students that she has. Okay, so now you've dealt with 3 questions, and here's where we want you to take a look. Flip your page, go to the next area, and we want you to take a look at this first. Maybe you don't go to the next page, I don't know. Yeah, you can see it right up there. I'm not worried about that. Are my passion, my love, and my skill intertwined? Is there a relationship between the 3? Is there a direct and obvious relationship that I can point to? You've got a couple minutes, talk to somebody about what you had, and are they intertwined, or can they help you see that those 3 things are intertwined in the person that you are? Go ahead, talk with each other. Would you please re-engage with me? Please come back with me. I want you to be aware of this statement. I want you to be aware of it. John Urshel, former All-American here at Penn State, PhD now in math from MIT, quit playing for the Ravens after 3 years, not because of CTE, he makes that very clear, but because he loved math. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. And I love this statement. You can be passionate about 2 things that you love to do. You can do 2 things very well, but at some time, you must choose to pursue the one thing that fulfills you most. Now I want you just to roll around in your head for a moment. People who you know who are working for the money, or people who you know are working for something that Dad created, or the people that you know who are out there because it was a good idea at the time that they went into the workplace. This was a good place to go, but you've heard from them, I hate what I do. I hate what I do. I had a friend who owned an auto repair shop, and Dale, he is now retired. But every day I would win him, by the way, he was very successful. Private auto repair. Please reconvene with me. Here's what we learned from the 31 teachers we interviewed who we knew were in it for life. They were in it. They actually saw it as their calling, many of them would tell us. Emphatic yeses. There was no question. I'm a teacher. I'm proud of who I am. That's what I do. We had qualified yeses. And those qualified yeses many times were things like, I don't accept it every day. There are days I wish I wasn't. But I mean, they went far enough in depth, we would say it was a qualified yes. Then we had questioning yeses. From Oklahoma, we heard this. I'm not sure that I can survive in my job on the pay I have. We heard that from Oklahoma and Indiana both. And they both, it was interesting, this year they made the news, both states, on the teacher pay in both states. And they would qualify their question their yes that way. I'm just not sure I can continue to do it. I'm a single mom. I cannot take care of my kids on the money that I make. Okay? We only had one person gave us an emphatic no. And that person just said, no, I don't accept it and I'm looking to get out. That's what I'm looking to do. So the principal miscalculated in thinking that that person was in it forever. Okay? Don't forget at the bottom of these questions you have a rating that you can rate yourself. I haven't mentioned that, but you may do that. Let's move on. I want to share with you, this is the toughest question that we ask people. It was the toughest question for them to answer. And it's a question that you've got to think about. If you talk to, and this comes from the literature on motivation and what happens in the world of motivation and leadership. And the question is, will you give up everything you have to find out what you can have? Will you give up everything that you have to find out what you can have? I love the statement from Shawana Nyquist. It's not hard to decide what you want your life to be about. What's hard is figuring out what you are willing to give up in order to do the things you really care about. You ever met anybody who was going to write a book and never did? Have you ever met a person who was going to go on some kind of trip and never did? It's on my bucket list. It's on my bucket. Well, when are you going to do it? I shared this story with you very quickly. I used to be an assistant basketball coach before I spent some time as the head coach at Susquehanna University. And one night we were, after practice, we're in the locker room, and I'm mouthing off, being the faculty room lawyer, as I call it. You know, someday I want to write a book, I want to write a book, and our head coach, Don Harnum, grabbed me by the shoulder and looked right at me. He says, Coach, when are you going to do it? Took me 3 more years, but I finally did. You know, you can talk about it, but the thing is, are you willing to give up all that time you're going to give up to do whatever? Or what is it that you are willing to give up to get to where you are? So that's the question. These are thoughts. I want you to think through that before I show you the responses. Because I'm going to tell you they're really mixed in this one. And we'll show you why. Think through that very clearly. Now let's go to the responses. What did we learn? There were emphatic yeses. Remember a while ago I said there was a lady from Arkansas? She told the story of how she had 4 kids. She left her abusive husband with those 4 kids. She left them, went to Arkansas, to some town she'd never been to, and started to study to be a teacher. She said, I had to give up my entire life to become what I became. So she had it was easy for her. We had other qualified yeses. What we found in the qualified yeses and emphatic no's was the age of the teacher, how long they have been in it. Qualified yeses, emphatic no's, and I'll say qualified no's, all 3 of them, had to do with the number of years of experience. The more years of experience, the more we heard from teachers, I'm not going to give up what I have. Now we heard one really interesting story, a lady who had lost her mother through cancer. And within a year, her husband had a tragic fall in his work. I gathered that he was a construction worker in high-rise type buildings, and he fell, broke almost every bone in his body and all that. And she said, after going through those experiences within a year where I lost my mother to cancer, who was healthy until she got cancer, and then this happened to my husband, I've got to tell you, no, I will not give up everything I have to find out what I can have. But, as we said, there were others. Here's what I want you to think about, and one of the things we were thinking about. Mary Ann uses a lot of these questions now in interviewing for jobs. And what she tries to find out, is this a person who is willing to change as change is required? Is this a person who will say, I'm going to change what I do? You can see in some of the responses that you had there, we had some who won't. We have one lady who's a marvelous English teacher in the state of Ohio who is very emphatic. I'm not changing for anybody. They'll fire me first. Then we had another person from Oklahoma who said to us, I hate the testing. I absolutely hate the testing. But yeah, I gave up a lot of things I did so that I make sure kids get through the testing programs. I don't like it, but I will do it. As she elaborated on this question. It's something we all have to think about if we're going to define our purpose. If we're going to define our purpose, what will we give up in order to achieve that purpose? Next question. I think this is an obvious one for any of you that are educators and work with kids and work with parents. Can you say no? Can you say no? I want you to think about that for a moment and then talk to the person you've been talking with about the difficulty you have at times in saying no to situations in your job. Just share with them the difficulty you might have in situations you have in your job of saying no. Whether it's to a student, to a parent, to an administrator, whatever it is. Go ahead, I'll give you a minute to talk to each other. Please come back with me. And I want to quickly take a look and make sure you don't miss Henry Wheeler Shaw's statement, or Josh Billings' statement that comes from Henry Wheeler Shaw. Half of the troubles of this life can be traced to saying yes too quick and not saying no soon enough. That first day in the classroom, and you know that kid's the troublemaker. That first day, that first parent who calls you, and Mary Ann would share this with you, and you have to say, wait a minute, are we here to help your child, or are you here to tell us we're doing the wrong job? They're all the things that go into being an educator. And we have to think about this question. Do we have that capability? This is what we found out. Emphatically, yes, for 38.7%. Yes with a qualifier. But it was interesting. In this case, we had emphatic no's and qualifying no's. We heard from teachers who said, that's my biggest problem. I can't say no when other teachers ask me to do things. I can't say no when the kids break me down. I can't say no when an administrator comes up to me and wants me to do something. I share a story with you every year when I taught at Middleburg High School down in Snyder County. Every year I would get, excuse my language here, but I'll say it, the badass ninth graders. I taught seniors. But every year Jim Howe, my principal, would walk up to me with the schedule and he'd say, I know, but you can handle it. I love those kids, by the way, and I love them now. They're all grown adults and grandparents, okay? That was that long ago. But the fact is, I knew how to say no to them. I knew how to corral them, I guess we'll say. But that's something we have to be able to do as educators. And if we're going to fulfill our purpose, no becomes an answer. It becomes an answer that we must say at times. Here's the final one. Can you play hurt? And let me explain to you why I have this there. We have a reference to Jackie Robinson. How many of you have seen the movie 42? Okay. If you haven't seen it, or I would hope you've read about Jackie Robinson and understand what that man did. When he broke into the major leagues with the Dodgers, baseball was all white, all Caucasian. No Dominicans, no Central Americans, which today they kind of dominate baseball. But anyway, he was told by Branch Rickey, you have 1 year and you absolutely cannot fight back no matter what anybody does to you. It was in his contract that he would not fight. Whatever was done to him, he was spiked. He was called the most nasty name that you can call an African American. From the stands, from the dugouts, the Philadelphia Phillies stood up on the dugout with bats and their knees up like World War II guys, aimed at him every time he would come to bat the first several times they played him. He didn't fight back. He did not fight back. He was clearly able to play hurt. Now, do we have to play that hurt? not necessarily. By the way, second, third year and on, he fought and won most of his battles, okay? But as a teacher, how do we feel about it when that first parent just literally gives us hell on the phone? How do you feel about it when the principal comes in and says, I don't like what you're doing? How do you feel about it when a group of kids, I used to have this dream, the class decided to not behave at all. They were going to drive me out of there. I used to actually have that dream. How do you deal with that? Can you play hurt? It's part of being an educator. When you're working in schools like we do, K through 12, it is very difficult. You've got to be able to play hurt. I would want you to think about this. Can you play hurt? Can you play hurt when your colleague next door says you're crazy to do that for that kid? Can you play hurt when a group of colleagues in a meeting come down on you, which we had one teacher tell us a story about that. Her team turned on her, completely turned on her because of the decision she had made. And that team said, I'm not going to work with you. Well, here were our results. What did we learn? Of this group of people, 61% said, absolutely, I can play hurt. I've been hurt by parents, I've been hurt by kids, and they gave us illustrations the whole way through the work that we did. And I can play that way. I can deal with that. We had the qualified yes. As you'll note, we had nobody give us an emphatic no, and only a couple people qualified no. They're able to play hurt. They're seasoned veterans, and they realize that goes with what we do as educators. Now, where have we gone with this? Well, this is what we want you to think about as you leave here. Your purpose is who you are. What gets you excited? I might even say that your purpose is remembering why you're here. As you go through all those 8 questions, you begin to evaluate yourself. You begin to think about yourself as an educator. And I would want you to think about it in a sense of being very, very brutally honest with yourself. And ask yourself, is there any one area in those 8 questions where I need to do some work? Where I need to learn how to say no more? Where I need to learn how to be willing on an in-service day to not walk in and say, oh, do we have to do this again? Am I willing to try to go into that day and say, maybe I'll get something out of this that can make a difference. I'll give up something I have to find out what I can have. Critical questions for those of us. How does it relate to the teacher shortage? Well, we contend if you find people who can really delve into these questions and begin to give you answers related to those questions, which I wish Mary Ann was here to share with you what she's learning as they use them, you may be able to find that candidate who's going to stick with you, who's going to say, I know there are going to be bad days. I know there will be days that I'm going to have trouble with all my friends wondering, why did I want to be a teacher? All of those things can happen in what we do as educators. I would hope you're going to be able to take something with you to think about this. I appreciate you being with me. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.